So 2011, okay, I start getting into buying and selling weird and wonderful cars. And for me, weird and wonderful is basically anything American. Living in England, it kind of sets your scope a bit low. We got Morris Minors and Austin Minis. As soon as you jump in like a 70s Oldsmobile Cutlass, you know you're having a good time. But there's a couple of things that are completely unobtainable when you're a young man. And GT40, supercars, those kind of cars have never been within my mists. You know, I've never been able to get my hands on one. And 2011, I met a guy called Mr. Lees, okay, Pete Lees. And he said, oh, my dad's got a GT40. And, you know, as a young man, we didn't really realize that there was real ones and fake ones and replicas. You kind of assumed that a GT40 is a GT40. He showed me a few pictures, and his dad in his garage at home was built this amazing GT40. 302 V8, UN1 Renault gearbox, the same as that goes in like the early Renault 21s and the DeLoreans, that kind of thing. And basically this car had been built on the lowest budget you've ever seen. A gentleman called Ivan, on his evenings and his weekends, went home and used whatever he could to make a car. And from the outside of the car, it was really, really nice. It had like knockoff style wheels. It was perfectly in proportion. But the thing that made it really, really special is it was a Mark III, okay? Because basically in the GT40 world, I've learned this over the last year, you have a Mark I, a Mark II, and a Mark III. And the Mark III was a road-going car, okay? 4 circular headlights on the front, like the 58 kind of Chevy trucks. They had the twin circle headlights on the front. Well, that's the same as the Mark III GT40. And basically, it was a road car, okay? It wasn't like made to go around a track at super speeds. You open the rear body on the car, and basically it had a trunk in the back and cast manifolds with an ugly exhaust that went through the back. This car was made for your everyday use. I asked him, I said, hey man, if you ever want to sell that car, not knowing its true value or not knowing just how it looked, really, I've seen some pictures of it and I knew that the guy had driven to Le Mans in it. He didn't drive home because it broke down, but he drove to Le Mans in it. So I was like, I want it. So every year, same story, okay? You go around, you take some donuts around, you drop a crate of beer or some nice coffee or whatever, and you just get talking, you know? And slowly after about 2 or 3 years, he allowed me to pull the front of the cover off and have a look. And, you know, a couple of years later, he'd be like, oh, I'm not selling it, leave me alone. And the guy's now in his early 80s or late 80s, early 90s, and I got the phone call. And this is on New Year's Day, okay? So, you know, I'm trying to have some time with my family. I work 12 hours a day every day. So New Year's Day, my wife's like, what the hell are you doing taking a call on New Year's Day? It's family time. And I wasn't hungover, which is really rare for me because normally New Year's Eve, I'm out of my box, all right? I'm completely unpacked. But on this day, I was completely sober. 9 o'clock in the morning, I get my phone out of my pocket. And I'm like, hello mate, how you doing? Oh, my dad wants to sell the GT40. I'm like, cool, I'll give him like 20 grand right now. And he's like, no. My dad said, it looks better in pictures than it does in real life. Go see him. But he said there is this other guy who is really interested, who only for the last couple of years has kind of been doing what you're doing. So I don't know if like they kind of like listened to me once when I was talking crap in like an English pub. And I sort of say, hey, if you're going to buy a car, you need to get to know people. You need to show your face a little bit more often so that when they go to sell it, you're the first person on their mind when they're considering taking that leap. He said, oh, for the last 2 years, he's been knocking my dad's door and saying, hey, I want to buy the GT40. But you know what? Because he's been there recently, while his mind is telling him to sell the car, he's kind of thinking of going with this guy. So I was like, look, just send me his bank details. I'll pay him now. There's no way I'm losing this car. Can you phone your dad now, who's like early 90s, and say, I'm going to be there now. I'm going to load the truck up. I'll get some cash out of I had to go like 10 different cash points to get like 500, 500, 500, 500. And it's the old English way, all right? 10 grand in the front pocket, 5 grand in this pocket, £1,000 here and there, and 3 grand in the truck. Because, you know, if you're going to negotiate, oh man, I've only got 15 on me. And then you start pulling it out. Oh, let me go see what I've got in the truck. You know, have you got 500 I could borrow? You know, you got to play the game a little. When I got there, I looked at the car and it was rough. Like, I mean, this car got stored 8-9 years ago in a workshop. The doors were off it, the paint was faded. He put a cover over it and the rain really killed the paint. You know, it oxidized, it went kind of white, kind of cracked. And I gave him 18 grand for the car, right? And you know what? within 10 minutes of owning the car, I didn't regret it because I gave the man a figure that I feel like I wouldn't lose on. But if it was anyone else, I would have bid him in the balls and walked away with it for like 12, 13 grand. But on the same hand, I got something that I can build. And, you know, what I'm trying to do is do it in such a way that it will have this Mark III exterior, which in my opinion is long and beautiful and glamorous. Like, it's got a line, it's so beautiful. A lot of people like the shorter Mark Is and Mark IIs, but I want to do some real nostalgic looks with this car. I want the outside to be period perfect, but underneath I want to have a bit of an animal. So I've gone original aluminium uprights, 4-link on the rear, new upper and lower adjustable rose jointed wishbones, big EBC brakes. We're going original Boreani wire wheels. If some lovely person out there would like to give me a set, I'd love you forever. But on the same hand, I want this car to look aesthetically perfect. But when you pull those covers off, this car is going to be an animal. Okay, we're going to have a 302, but it's going to be a fire-breathing Simon Hicks powered V8. So, you know, we got some cheap Flowtech heads from Summit, and we ripped them all apart, flowed them, ported, polished them, had a match with the intake manifold. We're going to town with a big snake exhaust system that flows into each other, so you get that real supercar roar. This car is going to be something of, you know, it's going to be enormous. It's going to break the GT40 world because you have the purists that want it original. You get the, you know, the guys that kind of throw the rule book out the middle. We're trying to bring those two teams of genres together to build something special, beautiful, but super fast. So when we got the car back to the garage, you know, we looked at it, and this car is built out of parts which you would imagine on your family sedan back in 1982, okay? It had Granada front suspension. And what they did was back in the 80s, okay, when this car was designed, it was designed by a man called Ken Atwell, I believe, which designed a car called the KVA. He used to work at Ford, all right? And when they developed this body, which was the KVA body, okay, he said to Ford, they had a car that was smashed up, a real Ford GT40, a Mark III, and the gentleman was like, hey, we need you to repair it. He was a very, very good fiberglass worker. And they said, hey, would you consider making this body perfect for us? You know, would you repair it? And he was known as one of the best fabricators of fiberglass in the world, you know? So Ford commissioned him to repair the original GT40 that was smashed back in the day. And he said, I'll do that. But the deal is, I want to make a mold, an exact mold of the original GT40 Mark III. And this story only came about in a pub in England, okay? So when you've got a man that is known for his exquisite fiberglass work and a high-ranking Ford executive in a pub having a few beers, something crazy comes out of it. A GT40 that I found in a garage after being stored for 10 years. It doesn't really get cooler than that, right? But what you do find is people take molds upon molds upon molds over the years, and some things change, as in the lines. And behind a lot of these GT40s, okay, where the driver's door opens, there is a very small ridge, okay, and it's like a drip rail you'd find in a modern car. And we don't know where that mold has come from. We don't know if Kenneth Atwell was like, this is my, you know, piece de la resistance of him putting his own name on it indirectly or what. There's a very small line on the back of that door which wasn't on the original car. So although this car was taken from the molds of a real GT40, like a really, really rare car, we don't know if he's trying to tweak the edges a little bit to make it very special. But now we're in the build. So I've been building this car 2 episodes a week, taking it apart, and the car is a lot worse than we expected. I mean, the front suspension was 4 bolts and it fell off, right? It was that bad. The interior is done to a high spec, but it was done on a budget. You got to understand, this guy built it with no money in his shed, and he did a phenomenal job at the time and for his budget. But what we've done is we've thrown quite a lot of that away, and we're rebuilding it into such a way that when this car will be ready for sale, it is going to be a world-class build. It is going to be amazing. But it's the silly things that we're finding that are quite scary. So on the designs back in the 80s when they, you know, developed this car as a kit, the rear trailing arms were designed to come down, be welded at a 45, and then come down. So this arm here, which was welded, if you went over any kind of pothole or anything like that, it would just snap and break. The coolant lines on the car run directly underneath the car, but protrude the lower line. So if you hit any kind of like sleeping policeman or bump or anything like that, for sleeping policeman, by the way, in England is what we call a speed bump, right? So they're out to get you, these speeding policemen, I can assure you of that. But, you know, the coolant lines were underneath, so if you went over a bump, you're going to burst them. The interior was designed in such a way that the water pump is basically in your ear, okay? So the engine is behind you, and the water pump protrudes through the firewall to the point where you can kind of feel the reverberation of the belts spinning on your elbow. Like, we're trying to do as much as we can to make this car usable and kind of repairable. Because if that water pump went wrong, you know, before we've been playing with it, you have to take the engine out. Like, there's no way you could replace it. This car needs to be a car that we can race, maintain, look after, and repair with ease. So people don't understand, okay, that when you buy a Lamborghini, like a fake Lamborghini kit car, buy a Diablo replica or a fake 355 based on a Toyota MR2, okay, these are what you would call in the modern world as a kit car, yeah? But you've got to understand, like Ultima race cars and GT40s, that kind of essence, these cars are designed on the original cars, okay? These cars back in the 60s are exactly the same as what they are today as a kit car. The GT40 kit cars are a fiberglass body on a monocoque chassis with, you know, a big whacking great V8 in the back. These cars, if built right, done to the right specification, you can drive your car to Le Mans via McDonald's. There was a very classy picture out there of a gentleman going through McDonald's in his Le Mans car, okay? You can drive it to Le Mans, and you can actually apply to be in a class with original race cars of the 60s if it's built right. The original GT40s were just a load of parts thrown together by a load of very special, amazing people. And, you know, nowadays you've got the Ford versus Ferrari film, which really gives you a feel of how crazy it was back then and how easy it was to go from the top to the bottom by a few modifications that someone came up with in a shed. You got to understand, when this car was built, it was based upon that love and that feel of being a race driver and actually being able to build it in your shed. When, you know, Ford developed the Cobra and then they built the GT40, that was the same idea. How can we put the Cobra running gear that's in the front of a car in the back to give us better weight distribution and actually maybe be able to put that traction down a little bit better on the back and compete with other people? Well, it's a bunch of car guys in a garage, like-minded, car-loving people building something that they think will change the world. And they did. The problem I have, right, is being hard up, yeah, I live in a government property in the UK, spend my whole life building and buying and selling the cars I love, okay? But what I've found over the years is the transition between buying, you know, a fake Lamborghini to a GT40 normally results in me having to sell that Lamborghini because I don't have the money like most people with affinity budget to go, hey, I'm going to go buy, you know, a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, a Murcielago, and a Bugatti. Like, I don't have that kind of, like, bankroll, you know? But since my life changed through COVID, I'm at the point where I'm selling cars, I'm making money. And if I do this right and I build this car to the spec I want, this may be the car that I can just never, ever let go of.
We'd like to thank Glossit for supporting the VINwiki channel this month, and right now Glossit is offering the best DIY ceramic coating package that we've ever seen or certainly offered here on VINwiki. For just $69.99, you're going to get their graphene ceramic coating along with the Real Difference Maker, their ceramic detail spray. Now that's a $50 bottle of spray detailer that I truly love just for daily use, but when you use that alongside their graphene ceramic coating, it makes the removal a lot easier, the outcome a lot smoother, you avoid high spots and things like that. So a DIY idiot like me in my own garage can achieve an outcome pretty similar to what Rich and his team were able to do last year on the Paris Hilton SLR, which I eventually torture tested on rallies and road trips and all this stuff, and it is now in Bulgaria, still looking wonderful. So check it out now at the link in the description below. There's a very limited quantity, so respond now and get yours for just $69.99. Thanks, Glossit.